What's up, guys? Welcome to another Holding Court. I'm excited to have on Annie Montoya. She's a hockey mom, hockey wife, a Dallas realtor specializing in hockey clientele, and co-founder of the athlete relocation service featured by the New York Times ProAthleteRelo. Annie, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So, first and foremost, how did ProAthleteRelo come about? How did it start?
Well, it started lots of years ago when I started relocating for my own family when my husband was playing in the NHL. We left school, University of Michigan, in 2005, and he went straight into professional hockey from there. And we moved on average every year and a half. And every time we would move, I would think to myself, I'm going to be a professional mover after this because we sure do move a lot. And I guess even being married to him before we lived the life that we did and moved all the places that we went, I never really realized kind of the human experience of moving that often. You kind of take for granted that the guys on a team are like from that town where they play. Like if you play on the New York Rangers, you must live in New York, but really that rarely happens. If it ever does, you're super lucky. And so at the very least, these guys are moving, at least for the off season, back home. Anytime they're traded or picked up off waivers, there's so many different ways that cause an athlete to move. So I just knew that there was a better way, essentially. And a lot of the time he'd get traded or picked up off waivers or any reason for us to move, and I would be the one handling the move because he would need to continue on his professional playing career. And so a lot of times there was a big lag in terms of how much time we got to spend together. And it was always a really exciting time when he was playing, and I wanted to be there with him, and the kids wanted to be there with him, but we always had a household to wrap up, essentially. So ProAthleteRelo was created with that in mind, knowing that there are families who would really like to just be able to hand off their move and continue on their athlete's journey, whether it be their husband or their boyfriend or whoever. It's really a great way for them to be able to stay together, and we can, handle the move for them. So it was started on personal experience.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that you kind of had to do some of the legwork with the move. A lot of people may not realize that when you're dealing with pro athletes, a lot of times most of the time, you're not dealing specifically with the athlete. They've got to worry about playing, and
Right.
They have enough on their plate. So most of the times that burden kind of falls to the wife or the girlfriend.
Right.
Sometimes, you're dealing with the agent, but 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, you're not dealing directly with the player.
And if they don't have a wife or girlfriend, it's their parents. So,
Right.
very, very rarely are these athletes the ones that are coordinating the move because they don't have the time or the luxury to do that. They have to report within 24 hours and they're focusing on their season. So, yes, most of the time it's definitely the wife that we're dealing with. And I've always said that it's kind of our goal to not speak to the athlete at all. So, because we really don't want to bother them with, moves are always worrisome. Stuff always goes wrong. There's so many logistical nightmares that are in store every single time you move. And when you're doing it year after year after year, it cumulatively takes a toll. So it's always it's a successful move when we don't have to involve the athlete at all. I'd say that the few times that we have spoken directly to the athlete, it's because their wife has a very young baby or is pregnant with a toddler, in which case they kind of step in to take a little bit of the burden off their wife, which is always really sweet.
Yeah, for sure. And then to kind of expand upon that. So one of the huge reasons I was excited to bring you on was, as hockey fans, you don't hear too much about the business side or the human side, as you mentioned. So, I guess to give fans an idea of what's it like when their favorite player gets traded or signed somewhere else or waived, what goes on behind the scenes that the fans don't see? What does that move look like?
Yeah, most of the time it's complete shock. I mean, there are some guys who are involved in their trades or signings because they have like a no trade clause or something like that. So they would have had to approve it. But most of the time it's a complete shock. And I always joked that like, if I ever went to Costco and bought like the bulk size of anything, that would be the kiss of death and we'd get traded, because as soon as you feel like you're planting roots somewhere, they get ripped out from under you. And you have to up and leave, whether it was, 2 weeks ago that you moved to that new place and then, you get traded right away. We've moved people where they still have boxes packed from their last move because it was so recent. They haven't even been able to unpack their boxes from the most recent move. And here they are moving again. So, it's always a shock. It's always a total upheaval. I mean, anyone who's moved knows how much of an undertaking moving is. And just because you're a professional athlete and you've done it so many times before, it doesn't get any easier. It's still, large households, fully furnished, kids in schools. It's a complete upheaval regardless of what you do for a living and how often you move. It never gets easier.
Yeah, and like you said, the shocking part, like sometimes, you hear about players who, I mean, it's super unfortunate, probably a bad way to do business, but sometimes players find out like through social media or through watching the news that, that I just, someone picked me up on waivers or I got traded or something. Like, have you ever had to deal with that on your end?
No, I'm way too old for that. I mean, we never found anything out on social media. Social media wasn't really a thing when Al was playing, so we always found out from his agent. But a lot of times, I mean, in my opinion, you should find out from the team, but we would find out from the agent.
Totally.
So it's definitely sometimes an indirect way that you find out about it. And it's rarely the people who should be telling you that you're kind of on the chopping block. But I'm sure that there are people who find out in all sorts of different ways. I'm kind of curious now. I'm going to start asking our clients how they found out. We never dealt with the social media stuff personally, but I'm sure that there's all sorts of stories about that for sure.
Yeah. As far as you wearing the hockey wife hat, what was the experience like on your end, like dealing with real estate agents or team services or whatever it was, like what is that like on your end?
Yeah, I guess people don't really think of the fact that each team is really its own entity and its own business, and they're all run so differently. So there were certain teams that we were on that I would like never even hear from the team services person or really never even hear from the real estate agent. And it was kind of just all on us. And then there were other teams where they were so buttoned up and on top of things and really made you feel a part of the team as soon as you were traded there, regardless of how much longer was left on your contract. Like those original 6 teams are the way that they are because they're run so well. And then, as you get to like the expansion teams, I think they're kind of still figuring things out. Not to say that every expansion team doesn't handle things well. And, I'm not saying that at all. But like the Montreal Canadiens come to mind in terms of how well run they were. And it's why they're such a dynasty because it really starts up at management and ownership and the pride that the business side takes in the team that they have and the city that they're representing and things like that. And it trickles all the way down to things like team services. So they were really good at the hand-holding aspect of it, but some teams certainly are not. And that's another way ProAthleteRelo can come in and kind of do the hand-holding for them because, I mean, the athlete really has no business doing it, but neither does the wife. A lot of them have very young families. They have disposable income. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to hire someone out to do what is always a nightmare of a job and move themselves across the country, sometimes to a new country. So that's really where we pride ourselves in stepping in and making things seamless and as stress-free as possible.
And you mentioned Montreal. It's funny because, not knowing how some of these team services operate, off the top of my head, I would think Montreal would be like a gold standard. Like, I mean, just all the history there, like you guys should be killing it. But I was going to ask you, like, what were the other, if there was any other teams that you felt really handled that aspect well?
For us personally or as ProAthleteRelo and dealing with teams?
Yeah, whatever. Just in general.
Well, I would say in general, like the Canadian teams, just because it is the national sport up there. I mean, every single NHL city, that is their, I don't want to say it's their only industry, but it's a huge industry up there. And that's what everyone does to have fun, is goes to go to a hockey game, and the tickets are a premium. And so they really don't have a choice but to run their hockey club as a business. And some hockey clubs are kind of, down in the States anyway, are kind of run as like a hobby. I don't want to, they're not to say that there isn't pride, not to say that there isn't pride taken, but just the difference in the U.S. and Canada, it's just less of a main sport. Down here, it's becoming more and more popular, but, there's some catching up to do for the teams that haven't been around as long and aren't in historically hockey-centric towns. But they're catching up, and it's becoming a more popular sport. Like for you in LA, I mean, that's becoming a huge hockey town, and same with here in Dallas. I mean, we've only been around here for not very long, like end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, something like that. But now it's really, I mean, there are so many rinks here now and so many kids playing, and the team does well year after year. So, they're all catching up, and they're all, the team services person here is really wonderful, and she's been very supportive of us, and we've worked with quite a few Dallas Stars clients, and it's gone well. So I do feel like it's becoming more and more of a priority to take care of these moves and these players when they're kind of in upheaval. So I think that we're getting there.
You must have seen my notes, Annie, because I was trying to figure a way to segue into throwing a little bit of love toward the Dallas youth hockey.
Yes.
Yeah, the youth hockey specifically, because I've been scouting for a while, and Dallas was always an area to me I was super impressed with, and I felt was just so underappreciated as far as great coaches out there. They're developing great players. I have some former players who went out there and just have gotten great coaching, and I was always super impressed with Dallas, the sort of grassroots and developing young hockey players out there. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe your husband Al is involved a bit with some of the.
Our oldest son, our middle child, he is on the AAA team here in Dallas called the Dallas Stars Elite for the birth year 2015. And my husband is an assistant coach, and they travel all over the place. And it's interesting that you say that you've noticed that the talent is so good here, because they keep traveling out of state, and the idea is to face better quality competition, but they keep winning. So it tells us that we're doing something right here, because the amount of talent is just incredible. I mean, Texas does not mess around in terms of its sports. If they are going to commit to a sport, they are going to commit 200%. And so there really is quite a talent pool, and coaches want to coach here, players want to play here. I mean, we've been really impressed with all of it too. And my husband is quite involved. He works for the Dallas Stars, and then he also coaches the Dallas Stars Elite team for my son. So, I mean, we've been really impressed with it too. We thought that we were moving to a place that there wasn't going to be much hockey, and there's a lot of hockey.
So going back a little bit to the athletes having to move, the whole experience and fiasco of that, there's kind of a misconception people have when they see maybe a big dollar player get traded, and they think, oh, it's not a big deal because they have all this money. There's not really any sort of I don't want to say pity, but like understanding of it. It's kind of just like thrown by the wayside. Right. And in my experience, that is completely not true. If anything, having to move your whole family across the country or state or whatever last minute is like the great equalizer. And it doesn't matter what your bank account looks like. It's always something that is very tough and very stressful. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that money can't buy, and making a move and an upheaval of a family not stressful is something that you can't buy. It's stressful no matter what. You worry about your kids having to uproot. You worry about your wife having to take on the responsibility of the move. You worry about what the playing opportunity looks like on the other side. So there are still I mean, at the end of the day, these guys are all trying to put food on the table. I mean, I know it's, first world problems, but they need to be moving toward better and better opportunities, and they need to be able to focus on that. And a move is always disruptful, regardless of how much money you have. And really, up until now, there hasn't been a service like ours, owned by two women who have lived the life and know exactly what it feels like and what's involved. There's plenty of relocation companies. A lot of them really focus on the real estate side of things. And I would say, even though I'm a realtor in Dallas, it's really not the main service that we provide. Actually handling all the logistics and contractors involved in the move is our main service, and also not making it so that the family member who's left behind doesn't have to stay behind. We either fly in and handle the move for them, or we find someone local who can manage the move on site so that they can stay together. And at least that part of the move is not as stressful anymore. There's still plenty of wives and clients that we've had that like to stay involved and prefer to be there, and those always end up being our most stressful moves, is when the wife insists on staying behind. And I get it. I mean, they have very high value items, things that they want to make sure get there. I completely understand, but they end up getting stressed out because there is always going to be a hitch. There's always going to be a wrench in the plan. It's never going to go 100% smoothly. So whenever there's like a delay in the movers, or any sort of wrench that's thrown into the plan, it gets very stressful. So, we're trying to remove that as much as possible. And we really like when a client hands it over to us completely, because we know that that's going to be the least stressful on them. But there's no way for them to know that. I mean, it's really hard for a lot of people to relinquish control. That's very stressful for them. And so we understand that as well. And we're always working in different ways to make it put as little stress on them as possible, however that looks. It's always completely personalized.
For sure. Yeah. And I totally agree. Being on the real estate end of things in LA, it's kind of like my bottom line is like, hey, let us take some of the stress off you guys, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll go back and forth with your agent all day, whatever,
Yeah.
Whatever it takes. But I know that these guys need to be focused, and they can't be, committing time to moves and stuff. It's way, way too much.
Right. And really, who to understand that better than another athlete, a coach, someone who's in the industry, and not just a real estate agent who's there to collect their commission. I mean, you really have to understand where they're coming from, and not be, not give into that stereotype that, oh, they make all this money, they're not allowed to have a bad day. It's still stressful. It's really stressful.
Yeah. And once again, perfect segue, Annie. You must have saw my notes again. I was going to touch a little bit on that of, knowing the game, in your guys' case, being around it so much. And in my case, just being a hockey nerd, and, knowing where all the practice facilities are, knowing which areas maybe you don't want to move a young rookie into, maybe it's a little too rowdy or something. Like, knowing all these things is so vital and so crucial. And like you said, being involved with the game, or having a deep understanding of it and kind of the lifestyle, I wouldn't be able to do it if not, I would be completely lost. But I'm sure that you experience a little bit of what I do sometimes, and you get people reaching out who aren't necessarily, I mean, you don't need to be ingrained in the game necessarily, but people who are just kind of on the outside don't really know the sport. And yet they how do you represent pro athletes? I want to represent pro athletes. And sort of opportunistic sometimes, surely, kind of, maybe a little bit bag chasing. They think, high dollar amounts. And we all want to represent athletes. We all want to, represent, sell Madonna's house.
Right.
But it's, what kind of advice, I guess, would you give to someone who wants to break into kind of the sports and entertainment or working with athletes side of things?
I mean, I think that anytime you're a real estate agent, you end up doing jobs that really aren't in the job description. But I think that when it's a high profile client like that, it's even more so. and you're not going to necessarily get more than whatever your commission is. So you have to know that you're going to be putting in a lot of extra work because they're absent and they are focusing on what's already a very stressful, high pressure situation, playing a sport for a living. So I would say that really to market yourself as a full service relocation expert as opposed to just a real estate agent. Not to say that real estate agents aren't important, they are, of course, but you have to understand that these people are probably not going to be there, and a lot of real estate is in person. And you're going to be dealing with people like agents and wives and things like that. And they're going to have really high standards, and they're going to want to make it as stress-free as possible, and they're going to want to just focus on their sport because, like I mentioned, it's already a really demanding job, and moving is, when you're in the middle of a move, it takes over your life. So they really can't do that. And so the real estate agent needs to understand that they're going to be taking on a lot of it for them. And many times when we're hired as the relocation company to source out their move for them, a lot of times we're working with their listing agent or their buying agent and working out some sort of agreement with them to essentially have them be their proxy in whichever state it is that they're moving from or into. And we found a lot of help with other real estate agents, certainly, who understand that, you know, these clients can't meet the movers, or these clients can't, you know, take the bags of stuff to Goodwill or whatever. And so the ones that we've worked with have been really understanding of that. And I would say that those people are going to be the people who continue to get athlete clients because they didn't stop at just the purchase or the sale of their home. They kept working for them.
That's, yeah, 100%. Like, that's great answer. And you kind of you kind of touched on it there a little bit, but I guess, you know, just to sum it up, like, what would you say like the key differences are in representing athletes versus, you know, your normal everyday person?
Expectations are higher with an athlete for sure. I think that it takes a really special kind of person to be married to an athlete. They all tend to be very organized and very involved because they are running, you know, many times like essentially a multi-million-dollar business that is their husband.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're really on top of stuff, which is great for me. I mean, I love when we have a client and we go into their house and everything's already labeled for us, and, you know, they already have a plan in place. And 9 times out of 10, the woman that we're dealing with already has that. So on the one hand, it kind of makes our job easier, but it also makes the expectations higher because they tend to be very organized, very type A, very on top of things, very intelligent. Not to say that other clients aren't that way, but because they know that there's potential to move so often, they're very organized and on top of things and involved. And so it puts a bit of a microscope for sure. Whereas when you're dealing with another client, this is probably their one and only move in their life, or one of just a very small handfuls of move. Maybe 1 or 2 times someone's going to move in their life. You know, they move when they start a family and they move when they're empty nesters, for example. An athlete is moving at least twice a year for the off season and for the start of the on season. So they have to be really dialed in terms of their vision for each and every move. And so the expectations are higher, but also the organization is better. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between my average client and my athlete client.
You mentioned your partner
Yes.
with ProAthleteRelo, Lauren Ellerby, earlier. How did you guys meet? And it kind of sounds like this whole thing started like pretty organically.
It started completely organically. We met each other when our husbands were playing together on the Winnipeg Jets, which was very close to the beginning of my husband's NHL career. He had played in the minor leagues for a few years before that, and then New York Islanders was the first team that he, you know, made a roster essentially for. You know, it wasn't like up and down kind of situation. Once he was on the Islanders, he was on the Islanders, but that only lasted, I think, 2 seasons. And then he signed in Winnipeg. So it was his second contract, NHL contract or team that he had a contract with. So we had just had our first baby, our daughter. And I think Lauren and Keaton, I think they might have just been dating at the time. And she and I didn't ever talk about, starting this company once everything was said and done, because we both had many years of playing career ahead of us. And then I'd kind of started a concierge service locally in Dallas, and I was actually speaking to our financial advisor, who was our advisor all through my husband's playing career, and he said, this is a great idea, but I would love for you to market this to your NHL family. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's where all of our experience is. That's where our network is. Even though I'm living here in Dallas, I really have so many potential clients all over the US and Canada. So I just posted something on my personal Instagram saying that I was kind of looking for a partner in this, and Lauren was the first person and to reach out and kind of the most excited about the idea. And so it went from there, and we formed our LLC last August. So we're just past 1 year of business. And I think we've had about 25 clients. So what's really cool is that we started this not knowing if we would have one client. And now, we've far exceeded what kind of our goal was in the first year. I mean, we really just wanted to get one client. And so now we had, 24, and we're hoping to continue growing. And our biggest advocate has been the NHLPA. Very many of our clients come from that referral, which is really great that we have the Players Association behind us.
Good for them.
And so it's been a really great success as far as we're concerned, and we just look to continue to grow and help more and more families and continue paying it forward to the next generation of professional athletes and their families.
Yeah, I remember, I reached out to you guys pretty early on. I think I just stumbled.
Yes.
Yeah, I just stumbled across it, I think scrolling on Instagram or something.
Yeah.
And I reached out to you guys pretty early on because I was like, this is a $1 million idea, like this.
Thanks.
Because, I know a little bit about, how tough it is and how stressful it is and how much it sucks for athletes having to move and worry about all this stuff. So I'm like, this is going to be the ultimate headache reducer. So, I reached out to you guys early saying that, and it's funny because like now you guys just have so many NHL endorsements and families saying the exact same thing. So,
yeah.
It's good to see. Like, congratulations, you guys have been
so much.
doing great work.
Honestly, so glad that it's worked out the way we envisioned it. I mean, Lauren is such a hard worker. I couldn't ask for a better partner. And I just knew going into it that I needed the accountability of a partner, kind of, because it's really easy when you start a business to get insecure and be like, I don't know if I feel comfortable putting myself out there. So whenever I'm feeling like that, she gives me the push. And whenever she's feeling like that, I give her the push. And so we've really become a great team. And, our clients' testimonials really continue to motivate us because, as we suspected, we have been able to be a really big help in their lives when it comes to all of the moving that's involved in being a professional athlete. So it's really a testament to our vision, and it really reinforces why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing.
And probably we could probably start to wrap it up here with kind of a last question here. What has been your favorite city that you guys have lived in?
Well, that's such a
in general
question. That's so funny because I have so many endearing things to say about every city that we've lived in, and I think that the reason is because I have so many wonderful memories in each place. So it's not very often that my favorite place is because of the place. It's never because of the place. It's the people. It's the team. I would say, Florida is an obvious one just because it's such a great place to play hockey. You essentially don't have to deal with any winter weather unless you're in the rink. And we had a ton of fun playing there. My husband played behind Luongo, who is obviously like Hall of Fame level goalie, which is always an honor to play behind someone like that. He played behind Carey Price up in Montreal, so that was also a really cool like hockey experience. In terms of like best hockey experience, I'd say Montreal, Winnipeg, because those Canadian teams really know how to put on a show, and the excitement around hockey is so huge. And obviously, like each place we had a kid was a really great experience. So it's hard to pick any one place. New York Islanders, I mean, we still go there once a year for their alumni weekend. They take such good care of their players and their alumni. So it's hard to pick any one. I obviously am partial to any warm weather place. I love Dallas because, again, we're not dealing with winter weather unless we're in the rink. But my husband didn't play here, so it's hard for me to say what it would be like to be here as a player. And this is like, where we've chosen to raise our kids. So really, every single one of the places that we've lived has brought us new, exciting, fun, fond memories. Edmonton was a tough one. I was newly pregnant with our third. I was
That's what I hear.
sick, and there are just 20 feet of snow at any given time. I mean, I don't think we saw one day of good weather up there, so that was a really tough one. But they do love their hockey. The rink itself is incredible. And my husband got to play with Connor McDavid. So, there's always some redeeming quality about every single place that we've lived. And every single place has been a really special place in our history as a family. So I can't choose any one. I'm sorry to disappoint.
No, it's understandable.
I wish he had played for LA at some point. My whole family lives out there. That would have been awesome. Or Anaheim, any of them. But it just was never in the cards for us. We lived pretty much everywhere else.
Well, you're also originally, you're a Californian, right?
Yes. Yep. I am. I grew up in Encino, went to Campbell Hall. My family has since migrated south. They're all in the San Diego area now. But yeah, luck was never on our side in terms of getting traded to a California team, unfortunately. But I did get to see him, play away games out there, which was always really fun. Like whenever he was on his California road trip, I'd be sure to take the kids out there and stay with my family and go to his games and see him and, go to Muntlinch's on the beach in Newport while we were out there and, try to hang with him as much as possible in my hometown. So we did get some of that, but never got to play there full time.
All right, Annie. Well, I don't want to take up much more of your time, but
It's been fun.
yeah, thank you so much. And I will say for anyone watching, anyone who, any athletes out there, especially, you need some relocation help, or as far as a real estate agent in Dallas, Annie is awesome. I've personally worked with her. We had kind of a little bit of a tough transaction. There was a lot of moving pieces. It's one where, the seller's in escrow and in escrow for a buy side too. So you need a great agent on the other end of those. And Annie was outstanding. So I personally vouch for Annie. She was awesome. So yeah, hit her up if you guys need anything. Annie, where would you like people to check out or follow you guys at?
So our website is ProAthleteRelo.com, and our Instagram handle is the same, ProAthleteRelo. And you can either message us directly there, or our contact information is on our website, and you can contact us either way.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Annie. Really appreciate you jumping on.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Nick.